It's so nice to be here with everyone. And I appreciate everything that Jessica said, and I will sort of reiterate our feelings that this is an extremely weird situation to be in, and we're all sort of dealing with a lot of feelings and a lot of limited bandwidth, and we have families and responsibilities at home. We may have school-age children. We may have all sorts of obligations. So we're here with you in that, and we sort of put together these ideas and these strategies as a way to sort of be. Oh, you're having trouble hearing me? Okay, I'll see if I can. All right. Is this any better? Can you hear me, Jennifer? Am I okay?
A little bit.
I'm a little
I think
low.
I think it's just a little choppy, maybe.
Oh, okay. Well, I will do my best to speak up, and we'll hope for the best. Let me get started sharing our screen. I appreciate all of you here today. We're going to try and keep things sort of straightforward, and lots of opportunities for questions and feedback. What Jennifer and I have sort of tried to put together here is a way to include digital platforms, digital scholarship, open pedagogy, and critical pedagogy into existing curriculum design, and sort of considering those sorts of ungrading and open pedagogical and critical pedagogical strategies from the beginning in a way that is sort of lightweight and helpful and supported by us at the library and other folks here at Claremont colleges. One of the things that we sort of wanted to reiterate throughout both of our halves of our presentation is why this idea of open pedagogy, critical and reflective pedagogy can work really well with digital platforms and digital scholarship. There's a learning curve. All of us have been pivoting to this online environment. Even if we are already familiar with a lot of digital tools and platforms, there's been so much we've had to manage in teaching in online spaces, but they can work really well within sort of ungrading or critical pedagogy framework. I'm going to do a brief 10-15 minutes on some of the support and curriculum approaches for digital scholarship at Claremont. Jen's got to follow up with some more sort of deeper conversations about open pedagogy and some of the interactive publishing platforms she can support. And then we've got a little bit of time to sort of talk about questions, talk about the assignment work, talk about your course, because your courses, your learning objectives, your goals, and again, reiterating that we are here to help you. I am delighted to see my inbox, faculty members asking, help me develop this project. Can you show up to my class? This is what we're here for, and this is what we really appreciate about this kind of job. Just to sort of center on where I'm coming from, my approach is really informed by scholars like Jesse Stonewall, looking at critical digital pedagogy. I come from an information science background with a science and technology studies focus that looks at these tools critically. So we can use them, but we can also talk about who they center, whose voices they elevate, whose they don't elevate, the sort of economic and power interests that go into all of these things. Jesse Stonewall's view has got sort of these four things in terms of what defines critical digital pedagogy. It centered this practice on community and collaboration, which is very in line with sort of open pedagogy. We are not, we're not depositing information into our students. We are co-learners on this experience. Inviting diverse voices, being very conscious of who we're centering in these conversations. Don't define a single voice, but we sort of embrace the collaboration and embrace a multiplicity of voices. And also this fourth point is sort of the tools of our practice and the creations of our educational engagement must have an application outside the traditional institutions of education. Jen sort of talks about this as, let's not do these disposable assignments. Let's talk about work in our courses that is sort of ongoing, sustainable, and useful in other ways besides the syllabus. Key things that I like to keep in mind is sort of learning this process together. If you are using StoryMaps or using an Omeka or using WordPress to develop a site, you're not going to know everything. Your students are not going to know everything. Learn this process together and be really explicit and intentional about, oh, this didn't work the way I thought it worked. Let's talk about it. Let's have some steps to sort of talk about what we learned and what didn't go right. Formative assessments and reflective feedback during the semester, so you're not like, here's our final project and I've got to grade it and students are panicking and you're panicking with the grading load. We have some templates and some tools and some models of how to sort of front load that and build that into the semester. Treating students as collaborators. I will show you some student work here with they are co-authors, they are co-creators, especially on digital tools. We've got to consider sort of web-based platforms and issues of is this sustainable? Do we want this website to be part of the student's portfolio going forward? Considering all of that as we go. And again, being critical about the technology always. So I'm going to talk about sort of two platforms that I support in my work that are used a lot across the colleges, and I will sort of show you how I support them, what they look like from the back end, and what sort of some of the coursework and some of the assessments and project prompts look like. The first one is ArcGIS Online, which is Geographic Information Systems. It's about maps, right? But it's more than maps. It includes thousands, millions probably of data sources, from census sources, from sensor data related to environmental analysis. We are seeing, this used to be really a tool heavily used by like the environmental analysis folks, but it's increasingly being used for all different disciplines who want to add a spatial element to their coursework, right? Because everything happens somewhere, right? There's always a spatial element, whether you're talking about social sciences, humanities. There's a whole conference going on at Huntington Library next week about James Joyce's Dublin and like all the layers of historical maps. There's all kinds of applications. And a piece, one of the platforms within our ArcGIS Online is a tool called StoryMaps, which I will show you in just a second. It's a content management system similar to WordPress or other sort of Wix or Weebly or web development sites that are kind of point and click. StoryMaps functions, a lot of faculty and students have used it to just put a site together quickly, and it's sustainable. It handles a lot of images. And you don't have to have a map. If you're not into maps, that's fine. It's a content platform just on its own. And there are other, if your students are, if you are in a discipline that's doing a lot of mapping, if your students have a project that they want to do a little bit more intense analysis or visualization, we do have tools like ArcGIS Pro. It's not open, though. Just to be clear, this is a proprietary piece of software. It costs us around $10,000 a year for the colleges. So I like to bring that up to the students as well, that you have access to this now while you're here as a student. You may have access to it in grad school or in your workplace, but there are open source tools and there are pluses and minuses. So we do sort of bring that into conversation. So I am going to take you. Are you still seeing my screen? I just clicked up there. Okay, good. Sometimes I'm not sure what Zoom needs to do. This is our portal for Claremont College's library. This is sort of where all of our students can get their authorization to get into ArcGIS. We have tools for sort of explaining this in more detail. I'm not going to go into everything, but they are able to self-authorize getting into ArcGIS just with their regular ID and password that they get from their colleges. It used to be more of a complicated process. But I'm going to sign in to just kind of show you what it looks like from a student's perspective, first time learning in, going into the map side of things. They are immediately brought up with a template that is probably going to be a little familiar with them from working with other kinds of visualization tools. This is what sort of the mapping interface looks like from the beginning. But let me show you, let's see, go back, all right, it's always that. Show you some examples of projects that we have worked on at the library, and they're sort of ongoing supported projects. across the colleges in Claremont. We do a lot of work with the Bernard Field Station, doing different kinds of assessments of the wildlife and the plants growing, and sort of getting students familiar with those kinds of assessments and doing different kinds of reflective assignments. We can do a drone flight, we can do different kinds of things. This is not going to move for me. Here we go. So this is, some of this is work that came out of courses. Some of this is work that, we did with special student thesis projects. Some of it is we just do, we'll do workshops on the weekend and take students up to sort of look at some of these types of outputs and types of visualizations you can get from GIS. So this is sort of the finished project, right? But what I do want to show you is, let me go, sorry, I'm going to click over here and not exactly show you what, this is, I'm going to drop this in the chat real quick. Jen and I have put together, still it's quiet, underwatery. Am I still underwatery? I'm sorry. This is an example from Pitzer students just last year using the StoryMaps platform. They put together sort of a documentation and background information about an Amazon development warehouse expansion in the Inland Empire in Ontario. This is the kind of product that students can do with StoryMaps. You see, it's not really too involved with mapping. They've got some satellite imagery. They have some demographic information. They've showed what populations look like here in the Inland Empire, comparing it to Los Angeles. This is census data they've pulled together. But this is the kind of work that sort of invites collaboration, and it invites sort of a reflective process about the sources that you're using. They've been very explicit here. I love this project, but where they pull their information from, other links that they've found relevant. StoryMaps makes this easy and almost too easy. So one of the things I've been trying to do is working with the faculty that I work with. I work with some faculty at Pomona College, Guillermo Douglas Jaime. Part of what he has done in working with his GIS students is sort of create these formative assessments as they go, allowing students to sort of document their time as they go, because there is so much sort of project management work involved with this. Let me show you, let's see, the kind of thing that we have done with Guillermo's class is create sort of a way for students to track their work as they go on this kind of thing. And a work log, something simple like a timesheet, can go a long way, because these platforms do have learning curves. And one of the things I feel like we want to do is let students engage with this material, learn things, and not be penalized if it takes them longer. If the tool doesn't work the way they think it's going to work, or if they need to find some other documentation or information, these kinds of sort of simple tools can contribute to a little bit more reflection and a little bit more peer mentoring. We found this really helpful. So let me go back. So that is StoryMaps. Another example that I found, this is a link in our document as well. This was an example of a student project at CUNY in New York. This student did sort of week by week mapping, again, in sort of a formative way, learning the tool and doing their project, but also being very explicit about being able to reflect on what they were learning and what worked and what didn't work. This is another sort of example, in addition to the time logs, of how we talk about the work as we go. Right, that's ArcGIS. Links and information available on the Google Doc. The other platform I want to talk a little bit about is a digital publishing platform called Omeka. And this is a product of years of scholarship in history and digital humanities. It sort of encourages and makes students think as archivists, think about being curators, think about collections and how things are described. It's widely used in higher education. It's used, there is a huge community of support. So if you're new to this kind of thing and sort of want to see examples, want to know that there's a discussion board where you can get some help, Omeka is a really good place to start for a lot of different kinds of history and humanities projects. One of the projects we have worked on quite a bit is, let's see, this is a project of Dr. Romeo Guzman in Claremont Graduate University. I worked with his students last year in their archives 311 class. This was a public history project that has been going on for some years with some community groups in El Monte in Los Angeles. And the students were involved with adding these elements to the collection. There were oral histories from community members. They were photographs of murals of places that didn't used to be there. It was sort of this goal of documenting the art and the history and the culture of El Monte, a neighborhood that has been, really gentrified, really changed in the past 20 or 30 years, and sort of capturing the history in a way that involves the community and involves the students in reflecting, on what's created and what does it mean, and not sort of relying on, well, this is in the official archive, so this must be the story. No, the students were involved in creating the story. And on the back end, what this looks like, this is one of the items in the collection. They have, some archival documents, right? This was a letter from someone in the 1990s, and the student creates this sort of record for it, right? They create subject headings. They decide what's important about it and write it in the description. They link to other resources that they think are relevant, and then they work with their peers and their instructor to create exhibits and collections that have certain foci, and it can be public. And this was presented in a Zoom forum with community members to talk about how we can develop this and what goes forward and what do we want to share with the public and what do we want to have conversations about. This is something we support. We have a couple different mechanisms to support this at the library. I do invite students to do their own projects. First example, the Negritude example was a student project. One of the things we have sort of built into Omeka is creating, at least for the libraries, it helps us, it helps the students, it may help you in terms of sort of collaborative, open pedagogy, critical digital pedagogy. If a student wants to do an Omeka project, we work with this form with them so they understand, what is the site going to be about. Are you considering copyright? What kind of materials are you going to use? Who's going to maintain it? What's important to you about it? Just sort of building these, again, sort of formative assessments and reflections into the process is something that we consider a lot. Yeah, let's see. Let's see. Sorry, I'm a little. All right, this is kind of all I had. Wanted to give you a little overview of the kinds of things that we do and the kinds of ways you can build this into your course material and build this into your learning objectives. And we're here to help. We are absolutely here to help with sort of course assignment prompts, assessment prompts, consulting with your students. I hope that QR code works to all the links that we have. That's the link I dropped in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing and let Jen take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeanine. And thanks, I iterate my gratefulness in all of you being here in these strange times. I hope that I get to see you in person someday. It's always my hope. I know some of you I've talked to in person already. But I'm going to quickly drop the link to my presentation here because I have a lot of links in addition to the document that Jeanine and I composed. And I want to share that with you so you can follow along if you like, or jump in at any time. I will also put this on presentation mode, sorry. And please let me know too if you can't hear me, or again, please interrupt either by chat or hand up during my presentation, and that way I can have a discussion. I like having scholarly discussions, so please jump in at any time. So as Jeanine mentioned and Jessica kindly introduced me, I'm Jen Beamer, and I'm the Scholarly Communications and Open Publishing Coordinator at the library. I giggle when people call me Dr. Beamer because I just received my PhD this past semester. My background is in communication and information sciences as a PhD, and then of course I have a librarian degree as well, a terminal degree there as well. And if you look me up at the library, you'll see that my area of expertise is, thanks Jessica, Dr. Beamer. My area of expertise is really in all things open and scholarly publishing. And I'm really, as we talk, you'll probably get the impression that I am super passionate about the publishing structure and power structure and social justice issues around publishing for academics. And you can reach out to me anytime. I help people with all kinds of things, putting their work in open access, negotiating terms with publishers, helping with copyright and fair use. I'm a strong advocate for students for open textbooks, which we'll talk a little bit about today. I also am an ambassador for the Center for Open Science. So I'm kind of like everywhere in these open and advocacy spaces for sharing our work. I believe it's kind of a fundamental human right that we all have access to information, especially in these times when a lab somewhere on the other side of the earth is collecting data and another lab can help analyze that data very quickly and solve problems like viruses and zombie apocalypses and things like that. So you'll see as we go that this is something I'm passionate about, and please ask questions. I guess one thing I am really passionate about, and over the past few years, I've been helping faculty on the campuses here with, is something called open pedagogy. And really, it's a very transparent way of working with your students. There are, maybe 5 years ago, I would say there are some materials, but now there are thousands of materials that are available and produced by professors, quality materials produced by professors, textbooks, chapters, articles, that we're able to remix, modify, and share to suit your own needs. So you're not locked into using that textbook that the students buy or a chapter from something that the students have to buy at the bookstore or via Amazon, or that we know I always get questions a lot about, is it okay to download this thing from the Russian server at this place, libgenis, or is it okay to ask for this thing? And so we know students are already using these materials. And so I think that we should start incorporating them and having conversations around those materials, and instead of kind of hiding them in the background and thinking they're these sort of black market things. So the premise of open pedagogy is, sorry, I got a little trigger finger there. The premise of open pedagogy is that really learners not only are consumers of knowledge, but also contributors and producers of this knowledge. And you as an academic or an instructor can work with students in certain ways that help them create really great knowledge. There are really only a few limitations that are related to thinking about and doing open pedagogy. And that is really that you have to remember that it's shared with others. The products. It also depends on open licenses, and I'm sure you've seen these kinds of licenses that I have down in the corner of my presentation, a Creative Commons license. And it's very active. So it really is about students engaging in this creation process. And there are many ways as an instructor you can benefit from this. Essentially, I feel like the most important part of practicing open pedagogy is that there's this emphasis on community and collaboration with your students. You're sharing resources together, you're finding and commenting on ideas, and you're really kind of engaging and maybe sharing some of your power. Obviously with the PhD and these other terminal degrees I've taken, until I got to sort of like the upper levels of education, I never felt like I was a collaborator in my education process. As an undergrad, I felt like I was there to attend a lecture, and there was no role for me to create. And I think today is a different place, and we, I think, need to consider how students can contribute to that content in our classes. And so, as Jeanine mentioned, I think one of the fundamental ideas around open pedagogy is this idea of the renewable versus the disposable assignment. And I know we've all written the paper, the 5-page paper assignment that probably later, if you grew up in the 80s like me, 80s and 90s, it went in the garbage can somewhere. It got filed in the circular file, and it never really got used again. And the premise around open pedagogy, much like the projects Jeanine showed you, are that there are these renewable things that others could build on, and that you also can use in the future to show students what, different kinds of assignments, and that potentially you could share with the world. And I'm going to show you some of the assignments that have been created on the campus that are being shared with the world, which is really cool. So again, as I mentioned before, students are producers of the knowledge. They create, they annotate, they can curate, update, adapt, and assess openly licensed work. And if you're interested, this is a really great website created by Robin DeRosa and Rajiv Yanjani, who are experts in the field of open pedagogy. And they've given all kinds of assignment examples and collected all kinds of articles, so you can investigate this a little bit more. And again, I mentioned just a fun picture here, this kind of idea of the professor. This is France in the year 2000. Of course, the professor is throwing the books into this, sort of like, I guess, tree whacker or whatever. I don't know, I'm not a landscaper, but, and there's a student, churning out the information which is being fed into the students' heads. And that is definitely, I think this is the opposite of open pedagogy. Definitely, we want students to help us create and share their knowledge. One platform that can assist you in this and is really quite easy, and I support, the library has an institutional subscription to this. It's called Pressbooks. And we've seen a lot of really great academics use Pressbooks to help create a conversation in their classes with their students, and where they see a need for materials that don't already exist. So Robin DeRosa was looking for some alternatives to the literature that had existed in her field, which is American literature. And so instead of hunting or writing her own textbook, she had her students engage in the process with her. And it doesn't have to be a textbook. I know if you've written a textbook, you're like, wow, that's a lot of work. But essentially, what they did is compile on this platform. This is the Pressbooks platform. They compiled chapters. They worked together to write an introduction about what they were writing about. And then students worked together in groups or as individuals to create the content for this book. And what it looks like quickly is this. It looks kind of similar to the ebook style that you would find in the library, where the students would write and cite, and then they would have a chapter. There's an example of a renewable assignment. They can see this forever. They become authors. They learn how to negotiate copyright. They learn how to become really scholars. And then the next chapter. So that it's not this huge, multi 400-page textbook we would see in chemistry or something, but it's a simple way to curate their written works. And then to share them, and I believe this is a sort of really excellent way to kind of release information to those who wouldn't have it. It's findable on Google Scholar, if we make it that way. Librarians are good at adding DOIs and doing these ISBNs and things, and so we do that. And then the book is also able to be reused each semester. So Robin then gets permission, and the students all agree to this license. And there's 7 licenses, so you can have a rainbow of which license you would like. Could it be more restrictive, or could it be less restrictive? And then they have this book in progress, and they can add to it constantly throughout the course. So it's kind of an interesting idea, and I think again it sort of grounds students in this sort of like academic publishing process. And Pressbooks, the platform, is actually really easy to use. It's WordPress behind the scenes. So essentially students can compose their work anywhere. They could do it in Sakai or however you wish them to compose on Word, and then they cut and paste it into the WordPress platform, and it formats it in this book style. It's also very open friendly. The Rebus Foundation has created it, and they also, if you cruise this link, have tons of information about different ways to use this platform to support open pedagogy. Another really interesting thing about this platform is that it also has the ability to annotate. And I think some of you, if you're at Pomona or CMC, you have access to Hypothesis. And I know last summer we did a big round of like, use Hypothesis for annotation. And this platform has it embedded into the platform. And so I'm going to show you some examples next of, and I'll go back to that slide, but here is Barbara June Spy, who is I adore, over at Pitzer. For the last couple semesters, she has made a organizational studies text with her students, and she's had them read materials, and then they create a book. And this semester, of course, they've done what Robin DeRosa's class has done, and they've reused the book from got permission from the last set of students and reused it for this semester. We are still working on whether or not students would like to be identified in the book as authors. Sometimes they want to, and sometimes they don't, and they're able to maintain anonymity if they like. But they also then, because the book is live and published, they are able to send the link to whoever at grad school or potential employer and say, I wrote this book in a team, so like I was part of this class. You'll see too, I have it set up so that this hypothesis pops out, and Barbara has been using this to help the students peer review each other's work. It's totally private. I'm not a member of the group, so we can't see what was going on there. But as an example, when I showed you sorry, I'm really like hot on the mouse today. Sorry about that. You can see here's the example of hypothesis, and I can write guiding questions for students, like and give them rubrics in hypothesis as it pops out. And then they can respond and answer the questions or add links or give comments, peer review comments back to their students. And so please, if you can, explore Barbara's, I think, class. Another colleague of yours over at Pomona who has been using this quite regularly is Esther Hernandez Medina. And in her sociology classes, she's done this in a little bit different way. She's had in the past, she's had groups of students create their own book. This is the most recent one where they have looked at women's autonomy. And then the students have all agreed to create the book with their names on it and leave a record of what they did. They are still working a little bit on this because of the weird semesters that we're having, but you can see each student has their own chapter assigned, and they've thematically arranged the content. And of course, too, they've uploaded a cover, a special cover for them too. So I usually go and talk to them at the beginning of the semester, and you can ask me to come talk with your students too, or to talk with you about copyright and fair use, what can be used, how to cite, where to find other resources. This platform is really interactive, and you can add, in Barbara's book, they have like a SoundCloud, they have YouTube videos, they have images. If you're familiar with some computer stuff, they have H5P where they can answer quizzes or have sliding images. And so it could become really interactive, and it usually students who are really into this kind of stuff really go all out. But you don't have to start from scratch. And sorry to flip back quickly here. There are thousands of books. I think Pressbooks is up to about 1,500 books that are written by academics. They only make it in this directory if they are faculty who have written the books or faculty who have sponsored the books. And you can start from there and pull in a book, clone a book, into the platform and get rid of whichever chapters you don't want, or start making chapters you do like, and all of them are Creative Commons licensed. So you have the ability to use their work without even asking them, they've indicated. And just, I'll flip through quickly, but here's some examples of, sorry, I'm gonna make you all sick. Here's some examples of books that have been created. Cool Japan, with students. Collaborative anthology, again with students creating the content. And yeah, are there any questions so far? I know I'm giving you a lot of information. I'll try to put on the video again. I know you'll think about this and ask us later. So again, I think the tool hypothesis is something that you can really be transparent with your students in having them and structuring kind of a rubric or assessment for them to go through the book. And again, I don't have a good example here from Esther or Barbara because of the way that they do this, which is privately commenting to each other, which is the great part about hypothesis. You can create this sort of list of annotations, and it can be within the group so that nobody feels like when they open the book, suddenly they're going to see the comments. And they've also created a community around these comments too, like, for example, of course, being kind and collegial. So you would never see, I think in Barbara's class or Esther's class, comments that would be like, this is wrong, or, you know, like very critical things. They're very kind of collegial. And I think this is a really excellent example of how people can create community, and also how in open pedagogy, which you might think it's just like, it's this open thing, and like, what do we do with it? Where you can really like guide students to focus in on the things that you want them to focus in on by asking them specific questions, or adding your comments to sort of guide them to where they need to go. So yeah, so if you have questions, I think Jeanine and I were hoping to leave a bit of time because we wanted you to kind of think about if this might work for you, or to ask us if you feel comfortable asking us questions about these kinds of assignments and this kind of work. Also, I think any kind of question you have, like, what do we support? How can we help? Those kinds of things. We have an assignment for you, but in case, as all good instructors do, we thought if you were interested in maybe sharing with others Jeanine, will you throw that in the chat? And then, if you were interested in sort of like getting help reframing, or any feedback from anybody else reframing. But again, we're more than happy to just chat and answer questions with you, or get your thoughts and feedback too. Again, I think we're maybe introducing you to something new or something you haven't considered. Or we can all sip coffee because it's Monday, or it's not Monday, it's Wednesday, but it feels like Monday.
It feels very Monday for a Wednesday.
Are there any questions?
I just wanted to say thank you so much. This is so helpful, and it gives me so many ideas to do with my, I don't think that I can do anything for this semester. But for next semester, for example, I have an interdisciplinary class about gender and sexual diversity. And this semester, I told them that I wanted them to do anything but an essay. I didn't want a paper. So a lot of them did. I have like curated, like there's like 9 students and each of them did a different thing, an art project, a podcast, a timeline. And I feel like maybe Omeka or I'm not sure if it makes sense to do it with Pressbook, because that would be more like a paper-based thing, but to create those, curating all those things like exhibits. And I don't know, I'm super excited about this. So I would love to have a talk to you to at least put together the things that we have from last year and then plan ahead for next semester. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, Jeanine. Yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out with us, because again, that's mainly the consultations we do, is helping people think about all the different things you'll need to do. And I think one of the more interesting and exciting things that happens with me all the time is then students come after to ask more questions like, how can I share this more? Or, like, I'm really proud of what my students did and I'd really like to make this go viral or whatever. And that's another conversation to have, right? Because sometimes things in the digital world will do things that you unintend them to do. So.
I'm wondering if you have recommendations for how to, if for example, the campus you're working on doesn't have access to Hypothesis, if there are other kinds of annotating tools that might be valuable to faculty.
Yeah, so there are some other annotating tools, and the reason why I think Hypothesis has been the one that we work with the most is because it's open source. I think one of the complications of being a librarian and also being in an academic library is that some of the materials that you want to use with those annotating tools, and I'm trying to think of the other one, Jessica, that we talked about. It's starts with a P. I can't remember. Some faculty. Yeah, Perusal, that's it. And there's been, I guess, librarians don't especially like Perusal because there's 2 things going on. One, unless Perusal has access to the material, you can't in theory use it. It's against copyright law. But 2, also one of the attributes of Perusal is that students often have to buy the text themselves. And then they come to the library and say, I'm having to buy this text for Perusal. Can I just get the library copy? And again, we can't upload due to copyright because unfortunately, all of those things in our database are for personal use, right? So you're not really supposed to redistribute them to share them with your friends, or you're not really supposed to upload them to another place because that becomes redistribution. So Hypothesis, while it's only available really openly, the loopholes are that if we put it in Pressbooks, we can lock the thing. I can lock the chapter and students can still have access to it in Pressbooks and use Hypothesis, but nobody else can see, which conforms to what we call the Teach Act, which was developed for students. You can use certain materials at great length if the students are enrolled and pay for the class, and that you only use that for a certain period of time. And also that you tell them, the students, please don't redistribute this, right? Like they shouldn't be able to download it and send it to that Russian server, which we know they do anyway. But so that's, I think, one of the benefits. And then for those campuses that have Sakai, that's another way we've been recommending is you can put materials in Sakai, same requirements. You can't open it up to everybody else. You need to make sure that only students who need it or who pay for your course can access it. But it can be, believe it or not, during COVID times, it can be the whole textbook if you really wanted it. But if you think about pedagogy and you think about your poor students, would you really want them to annotate a whole textbook? No, you just put in a chapter. Or does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, so I should say too, I'm not a lawyer and I'm also not, it's just my area of study, but I'm also not a vendor for Perusal, or do I endorse Hypothesis. It's just it seems to work better with our materials. It's more flexible to be able to put them away and then use Hypothesis that way. But it's very, I can say Hypothesis is very effective for helping students focus on things, right? I think in the highlighter days, we just highlighted everything. But certainly for digital annotation, those kinds of tools are excellent for focusing students on what you want them to know. I should also mention too, I feel like for Pressbooks, so we've had a couple of faculty want to actually write a book. And again, that's a huge undertaking, or, collect all their notes, put their work in Pressbooks and then share it. And that's one of the caveats that we have, is we encourage you to share it. The platform was purchased for open sharing. And again, we can help you license it in certain ways so that it still belongs to you and nobody would sell it, or, you're still protected with your copyright. And so I'm more than happy to have consultation if you're thinking about putting your materials all in one place. We had a faculty over at Harvey Mudd in computer science put all of his sort of like lecture notes in a Pressbook. And we're just working now on how he'd like to license, because some of them were in collaboration with other authors and he's getting permission, but we're more than happy to help. Again, it's not the same way you would write a traditional textbook where you would have peer reviewers, but that is something that other institutions do. You let us know, or let me know who you'd like to peer review, and I can send it to them without your name, and then they can peer review and give comments. So you could, if you're thinking of getting out of that traditional publishing circle, you could also use Pressbooks for that too. And I'm more than happy to support individual faculty.
I have a question. Like Gloria, I think I've learned a lot, but for now, I think for this semester, I'm going to stick to what I know, mostly because I don't have the time to put it into place, but I'm also thinking that my students don't have the time to learn new platforms. And so, and I'm a little concerned that with the proliferation of platforms and apps that our students have to master in any given semester, let's say they take 4 courses, they have to learn on the fly a number of apps or of programs that can be pretty overwhelming. Are there places on the library website where you have, quick guides to using Pressbook, to using Hypothesis, to using all of these, where they can just go to one place, Professor X asked them to look at this, they can go and look at it there, and all of them are in one place so that they don't have to do the work of learning a new app every time a professor asks them to do, which might take too much time for them, especially in the beginning of the semester, unnecessarily, right? So that's my question. And it would be useful also for faculty.
So there's a couple of different models that I work on, so for the most part, students know how to use Word and Google Suite, or some of them are writing. Barbara's students write all of their work in Box, and then Barbara has someone later cut and paste that work into Pressbooks so that it doesn't have to occur in the moment. When I go to talk to Esther's class, I teach them, I give them 30 minutes of how to use Pressbooks. It's super easy because it's like WordPress, and you cut and paste and then you hit save and then it publishes, it's instantaneous. But I also provide them with this grotesque, if I would say, it's the most excellent manual I've ever seen on Pressbooks. And it's written by a community of people who use Pressbooks, so it's constantly updated. And there's a few key things that I point them to, like if you'd like to insert a video, if you'd like to insert And I haven't really, once in a while, I'll get a student who says that something's not working, a browser. And so I'm there to kind of support or reach out to our Pressbooks vendor to say, why isn't this working? The other model that is used quite often, and I am in the process of investigating right now with the library, and of course with budgets and things, it's strange, but as you're suggesting, this is something to consider for future, maybe the fall. And that model looks like where a faculty would have an idea, and then they would collect the things they need over a period of time. And then hopefully we would be able to offer some kind of stipend so that you would have a little time off, or you could hire a grad student or some student you know who would then cut and paste the materials and format. We've done this in the library ourselves a couple times for our special collections. We have a grad student who produces the books and then works in collaboration with me on some of the like metadata and cataloging issues. So you could think of it in different models. For a few semesters now, I've wanted to go talk to Bob over at Pomona, the interim dean, to ask him about maybe reformatting his textbook grants, because it doesn't make sense now for students to come to your office to loan a textbook out, and perhaps we could invest that in helping a student be a trained student by me putting that work into the Pressbook. So if you can, there are ways to kind of do this without a lot of strain and stress on students. I totally feel your pain of the students having to learn new things, but I set them up all on the other end with their emails, and they get an email that click and they enter the platform. And then from there, it's really a cut and paste. At this point, we don't have students, and sorry to keep going on, Jeanine. At this point, we don't have students actually request the work like of a Pressbook. They need to have a faculty sponsor, and that's due to copyright and fair use, because we want to make sure that students aren't just posting, all of whatever they want. They need to have some guidance by people like you who know the ropes. So does that answer your question, Nathalie?
Yeah. And I'm glad somebody gave us a quick guide to Omeka, which is, thank you.
Yes,
Very useful.
thanks, Jeanine.
Yeah, you're welcome. We do have those sort of quick getting started guides, because the learning curve and the limitations on people's time is very real. We also are really, I know the semester is already underway, but we're also really glad to meet with you, to come to your classes. One of the issues with GIS and Omeka, it's not there's too much information, right? There's too many tutorials, there are too many guides out there, too many. But we can really help you scope things, pick out the top 3 for your students and make sure they get their help. We also are available for appointments with students. And for GIS, we are scheduling quick plug, GIS is going to be having Mat Mondays. We're going to have drop-in hours at the library every other Monday for students working on GIS projects. If they just want to come in and meet us for a Zoom and bring their work and ask for questions, I will be hosting that with Lauren Roberts, our GIS specialist, and Andrew Wilson of Pomona ITS. So that's hopefully going to be sort of a low stakes, easy drop-in consultation, peer mentoring thing for students.
What other questions, anyone? Okay, wonderful. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm gonna stop recording. And next session starts